Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Kavita Vardarajan, Director of Product here at Exaforce, and I'm here today to talk a little bit about aggregation. Why does it matter, and how does it work in the Exaforce platform? So, aggregation really matters because of two things, time and context. The SIEM is the hub of the SOC, and its key role is to be able to ingest alerts from a variety of different sources and make sense of them for the analyst team. Now, it is not uncommon to have multiple sources that produce alerts about what is really the same attack. And so it's critical for the SIEM to be able to recognize that and to present it as such to the analyst, such that two different analysts are not spending time investigating what is really the same thing. It's not even uncommon in some cases for the same tool to produce multiple alerts about what is really one actual attack. And so we want to make sure that the analyst time is valued and therefore that we present things as concisely as possible. The second main reason to do aggregation is context. It's critical to give analysts a complete picture of an attack and not just leave them to either find the other pieces of the attack by searching themselves, because again, their time is extremely valuable, and because doing so requires a great deal of knowledge. We want to make sure that they have a complete picture of exactly what happened so that they can properly assess the severity and priority and blast radius of a particular attack and therefore provide the most complete investigation. So time and context are really the goals here. Now, here at Exaforce, we approach aggregation in four different ways. We're going to go through each of those four examples here today. Now, as we go through this, keep in mind that unlike a traditional SIEM, none of the different aggregation mechanisms that you're going to see today were manually configured. They were all done by the Exabot with no human input. And so we'll talk more about that as we get through our different variants. The first one is duplicates. Now, you can see that here in our threat finding queue. A finding in Exaforce is essentially the term for an alert. And those alerts may be produced by us or by third parties. You can see that here. This particular alert has a tag that indicates that it has 79 duplicates. In this case, you can see that the finding is actually produced by SCC. And in this scenario, the user has a badly configured SCC or hasn't tuned their rules well. And the rule actually fired an alert every single time a user took a particular action. As a result, the user took this action 79 times and they would have gotten 79 different alerts. In the Exaforce system, all of these were determined to be duplicates and grouped. Let's take a closer look. So if we actually look at the alert itself, we can see that there were 79 findings and that the user, in this case, Akil, per performed this action 79 times. Now, this action happens to be one that they often perform. It doesn't seem like it's unusual for this organization. So Exabot determined this to be a false positive. But critical to the 79 findings is the fact that SCC produced 79 findings for this particular action because the user performed the action 79 times. Now, this could have easily cluttered the queue, but Exaforce aggregated them into one grouped finding that you see here. But how did we determine it to be a duplicate and not just related? The Exaforce definition of duplicate means that the findings are exactly the same, except that they differ on two dimensions, time and ID. So in this case, all 79 were exactly the same, except they had different times and IDs. And that's what made them duplicates as opposed to one of the other types of aggregation that you'll see in just a moment. So should the user be interested in actually investigating these 79 individually, we actually have them here if they come into the Investigate Detail tab and go to deduplicated findings, they can see the full list. But by default, they're presented very concisely as just one finding with 79 duplicates. And again, there was no configuration on the part of a user. The Exabot did this grouping by itself. Let's look at the second type of aggregation that the Exabot performs, which is what we call an attack chain. An attack chain, in this case, I've filtered to just see the attack chain so we can make our view a little bit easier, is recognized by a little pill here that says attack chain, and essentially represents a sequence of alerts or findings that together constitute the full context of what happened in an attack. So in these cases, the order or sequence actually matters, and each of them are not exactly the same. They actually each present a different part of the attack lifecycle that has been seen, and together constitute the threat. And so let's take a look at one of these in more detail. So here we can see cross-platform access from anomalous East Coast locations by this user. In this attack chain, there were 3 alerts, one from AWS, one from Google Workspace, and the third one also from AWS. And we can go into each of the individual findings here, or we can view the fully analyzed finding below. So we can see that the user progressed through 2 different MITRE tactics from initial access to discovery, accessing Google Workspace documents, and then going on to do some discovery activities, including some EC2 operations. Now, the Exabot continued its analysis, and we can go through and read that as well. But the Exabot actually joined these things and created the attack chain on its own. A human did not write anything like a sequence template or anything like that in order to prescribe that these things should be combined into one. And you might ask the question, how does it do that? How does it determine the relationships? One, it does that, in this case, based on the user, but it can also build these relationships based on things that are not just username. So it might be, these findings might be related based on user, location, attack patterns or event patterns. They could be related based on the resources or types of resources that they target. They could be related based on where they sit in the organization, etc. So the Exabot is pretty extensive in how it looks for relationships between different findings in order to establish these chains. And all of this is part of what we call the Exabot's knowledge model. When a new finding comes into Exaforce or is created, Exabot will use the knowledge model information to be able to assess what are all the related findings that I can find. Once it can assess the related findings based on any or all of these dimensions, again, those could be user IP, domain, they could be a single event, event patterns, combinations of any of these factors, resources, hierarchies in organizations, etc. Then it can take this related set and start to determine what is the individual relationship between each of these 2 findings. The relationship might be a duplicate, like we saw before, or the relationship might be a chain, like we're seeing now. If the relationship between related findings cannot be determined as duplicate or a part of an attack chain, then it'll get placed in a generic related findings list. This list constitutes the third type of aggregation that Exabot performs. You can see that here. So here's an example finding. You can see that there's a related threat findings tab, and all the related threat findings are listed here. Now, these, again, are not duplicates and are not attack chains, but they are somewhat related to this finding in some way, either based on user, resource, IP, location, activity pattern, etc., or a combination of these. The primary use case for showing you related findings is for a threat hunter. Now, if you're a threat hunter and you've read through the Exabot assessment and you understand it and you come to this Investigate Details tab, you can then start to look at these in order to say, okay, how might I continue this investigation? What is the extent to which I've seen similar activity before or similar things before that might inform exactly how I want to proceed with this investigation? So that's what the related findings are. Keep in mind that the related findings have already been assessed by the Exabot, and information about the related findings is already included in the conclusion that we present up front. So again, we've covered duplicates, attack chains, and now the general category of related threat findings. But there's one more. The last piece is historical findings. Historical findings are exactly what they sound like. They're findings that are related to this one, but that have already been actioned on. So they've already been closed or had their assessment done by a human analyst. And we categorize them separately because we want the Exabot to be able to learn from the conclusions of those findings. Let's look at an example here. So in this finding, we can see that there is a historical findings analysis tab. Now, this was the historical finding. It's a related finding that has already been closed, but was determined to be a false positive. This resolution field is inputted by a human analyst. So it's not the same as the recommendation provided by the Exabot. It's actually what the human analyst concluded at the end. In this case, the human concluded this is indeed a false positive and closed the finding. Exabot now takes the fact that this is a related finding and that it's already closed and it has this resolution of false positive to say, okay, that might mean that if this is highly relevant to this finding, meaning they're very similar, then I might be able to use the conclusion of that finding to inform the conclusion of this one. So it actually learns from the conclusion of that finding to help be one of many inputs into the conclusion about this finding, which also happens to be a false positive. So historical findings constitute the fourth type of related finding in the form of aggregation in Exaforce. So again, we had duplication, attack chains, related findings, and historical findings. All four of these are the different types of aggregations that you're going to see on Exaforce threat findings, and again, are all done using the Exaforce knowledge model and performed by the Exabot with no human involvement. Really emphasizing the time saving both on your analyst team and on your detection engineering team, and giving your analysts the most amount of context they could possibly have in both a readable form and in those details. To learn more about how Exaforce aggregation works or more about the system in general, check out our website or view the aggregation blog. Thanks.